Okay. You mentioned it before about leverage leasing as being, pretty much dead at this point in time under this particular Congress and past recent Congresses. Your view of the future, does it make a comeback at some time in the future as a useful tool to stimulate capital investment or not?
Well, you kind of wonder, going back to my little analogy about Congressman Blowhard, somewhere along the line, Congressman Blowhard's phone's going to light up because let's just take the worst case: an airplane crashed, and a couple hundred people are killed, and the reason they're killed is it turns out it's a 45-year-old airplane,
Okay.
and it's not anything to do with the age of the aircraft. It just comes up that it's a 45-year-old airplane,
Okay.
and then the populace starts calling up saying, why are we flying around in 45-year-old airplanes? And Congressman Blowhard says, we've got to do something to help the aviation industry. And, people start scratching their heads and they start saying, well, what do we used to do? And if they start saying, well, we used to have this investment tax credit idea, there used to be this thing called a leverage lease, but a lot of that's going to be gone because as we now move through convergence on accounting, we're not going to have an accounting ability to have a leverage lease. FASB 13 is going to go away. It's going to be replaced by IASB 17, which doesn't recognize a leverage lease. There is no leverage in the leverage lease. So I'm not sure what they're going to do. Somebody's going to have to come up with a new structure, a new something that the lawmakers are going to give or make a provision for.
One thing that I have noted, I'm curious your response to this, is that over a period of years now, going back when I'm going to say in the past 10 years, capital became very, very accessible. The industry our equipment finance industry had quite a bit of money. We started doing more capital lease structures. Matter of fact, we even changed the name of the equipment leasing industry to the equipment lease and finance industry, right?
That's correct.
Have we lost the art of structuring deals, or do we ever need that again?
Well, I think it's not that we lost the art of structuring deals. As part of this circling of the wagon of rule makers between Basel, SEC in the form of FASB, and the Congress and Treasury, the word structure has become a four-letter word. And so increasingly now I don't know how things are going to get done going forward. Government's idea is if you're going to take risk, then you should get big reward. If you're not going to take big risk, then you shouldn't get big reward. And so, the whole concept of structuring is to get a lot of reward out of not much risk. And so I just don't know how this is going to turn out going forward because the railroads will ultimately need more equipment. The shippers will need more equipment. Airlines will need more equipment. There's going to be a lot of capital expense, not to mention if you look at the budgets of the municipalities, there was a recent thing in the press that municipalities are going back to leasing again because there's just no money available. So you've got this big dam of money all pushed back, sitting behind the banks, sitting behind private equity, sitting behind hedge funds, and nowhere to invest it.
And then another version of structure that you use the connotation of structure of leverage lease structures, tax, putting all those together to come up with a structure, a tax-effective structure, not only for the lessee but for the lessor and investors. I'm thinking also the more mundane type versions of structure for lessees relative to solving a particular budgetary solution over a lengthy period of time. For example, I remember when I first got in this business with Finalco, and still tax structures were involved back then, but a gentleman by the name, and I can't believe I still remember his name, Daryl Simpson, was one of our analysts, and he would invariably structure something for a customer like a sawtooth lease structure where the lease payments went up and down over a period of time based on the tax appetite of the lessee, the certain budgetary forecast that they're giving them. And so you solved a wider solution with your lease, not just for the need of the equipment, but for how the budgetary and all the balance sheet might want to look over a period of time.
Yep. Not only that, but from the lessor side, there were all kinds of tricks you could use in the early days, like establishing a trust on December 28th, uh, closing the deal on December 28th, so that you got the entire year's depreciation for that year, and you started the lease in the follow-on year, so-called yo-yo structure. So, I mean, there was a lot of structuring technology that ultimately went into making these deals work for both sides of the equation, lessor and lessee. But again, if the lessee is looking at this purely from a cash flow standpoint, the lease would have been his most attractive option. And all this structuring was designed to make that as attractive as possible. None of it is available today,
Okay.
or at least if FASB gets its way with the economy.
Interesting. Well, we'll move kind of a little bit away from general leasing and leasing history, and more about you, more about looking toward the future, compare, contrast kind of thing. What would you say you personally, would you say some of your biggest triumphs in your career, highlights, that kind of thing?
Well, I think that probably there were a number of business transactions that we celebrated because we won a very competitive contest, and so as those deals got bigger, the celebrations became larger. But I think on balance, from a career standpoint, getting involved with the Equipment Leasing Association, or I guess more correctly, the Equipment Leasing and Finance Association, was probably one of my most rewarding experiences, because not only did I meet a lot of very nice people, but it gave me an opportunity to see what the rest of leasing was like. I mean, keep in mind, I didn't have to raise funds. All I had to do was back my truck up underneath the hopper and pull the chain. And the truck got filled with funds, and I could go out and invest anywhere I wanted to. I didn't have any of those concerns. I was not involved in the vendor business. I had no single investor business at the time. And so, to me, life was pretty simple. It wasn't until I got on the board of directors with the Equipment Leasing Association that I realized what the rest of the leasing business had to cope with, and why there were this parfait of investor types that were completely different from anything that I had to have experience with.
Okay, fair enough. And by the way, I would echo those sentiments almost exactly from my perspective as well. The ELFA and the association. Not that this is an advertisement for the association, but the types of people that you got to meet, the types of industry and exposure to different types of industries, and part of our industries that we got involved with when you were on the board, or just even involved in, I wouldn't have met you either if it wouldn't have been for the association. So I echo those sentiments. What do you think we in the leasing industry, the current participants today, what do we get wrong today about our business, about the industry? Creativity, entrepreneurism, that's a pretty wide open question, but I'm just kind of curious where you'd go with it. What do we get wrong today? What are we missing?
Well, I don't think we're missing anything, really. I think what the business attracts a certain kind of an individual because of the creativity associated with it, and the financial engineering that goes around it. And that makes for a very interesting group when you get them all in one room. In order to apply that technology or that skill set, you really have to have a favorable legal and rule-making environment. And it's turning out right now that the environment's not favorable. But going forward at some point in time, it's going to become a necessity for it to become in vogue again. It'll come back in a different fashion. There may be different participants. I suspect that private equity is going to play a much larger role going forward, which is unfortunate for the lessee, because the lessee is going to pay a lot more. Their returns are their return requirements are quite a bit higher than a bank's. But I think the banks have been so badly burned, if you will, between making an investment in the airline industry and having something like 9/11 take place where your equity is just completely shot. I mean, the dent comes over and takes possession of the aircraft, and you're tossed off the top of that lease. And then follow that with the Lilo-Silo stuff and the government's intervention there. I think banks have kind of put their hands up and said, okay, enough of this. We're going to lower our profile. We're going to do straight blocking and tackling, single investor stuff where we control the asset, and we can, make use of that if a credit fails or if we have a catastrophic event. I mean, think about it this way. If we had a number of aircraft with United Airlines pre 9/11, and if I would have gone into credit committee on any one of those investments and said to them, listen, we have stress tested this credit. We have gone through a very in-depth analysis. In fact, what we did is we assumed that 4 airplanes flew into buildings and completely destroyed the people in the buildings and made it paralyze the aviation industry. I can tell you that the head of the credit committee would have said, stop right there. Are you making a mockery of this credit committee? This is off the matter. I mean, no one would ever do that. And yet, here we are.
Yeah. That's a
so,
very
I mean,
way you put that.
Mentality. It's that mentality that says, if you think it could possibly happen, it will happen. And therefore, how do we protect ourselves? Well, are we as lessors going to be pari passu with the lender so that when we have to grab that airplane back, it's going to be between the two of us? Well, I don't think the lender is going to do that. He's not going to allow that.
Right.
We do have right in a document to buy the lender out, but the bank says, why would I want to buy the lender out? I mean, we're going to have to put a lot more money into a plane that is arguably not worth much today. Right. And we may have to fly it for 100 years to get the money back. We don't want to do that. So you see that the dynamics have changed with such force that it's hard to see how risk-averse companies are going to want to leap back into this unless they get something in return, something new.